Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Today we are going to be working on the 2021 Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled, and in today's video we're going to be doing a bit of protection to the bike. So I think it's probably a wise investment to take care of this thing. It's probably the nicest thing I've ever owned. So we are going to be installing some engine and oil cooler crash guards. Now I decided to go with some Hepco and Becker bars that I saw. I did a bit of research and found a few examples out there. There's SW Evotech, which I find to be just a bit too bulky and they protrude too much. I didn't like the way that they looked, although I'm sure they're really good from an actual product standpoint. Then there's also an offering by, I want to say it's Ducati. I'm not positive. It's unbranded from what I can really tell, but I've only seen it for sale on Ducati's website. I know AMS Ducati can get that part for you. And they are the upper oil cooler guards, which they look really nice and they're very minimal and sleek, but I want something a bit more thorough, and I wanted something that was gonna cover the engine case as well. So what I did is I bought the Hepco and Becker lower engine guard as well as the oil cooler guards, just to have that matching set. Otherwise I probably would have gone with the Ducati ones. Now that being said, I have received these, and when looking at the instructions, the engine guards seem to say that it won't fit a desert sled. Now, in all of the Hepco and Becker pictures that I could find, at least on the websites that seem to sell them, the engine guards look identical to the regular Scrambler, the Scrambler 62, as well as this bike. And when I bought these, I checked the page again, and it looks like the option for desert sled was on the regular ones, but then they also had an additional ad for specific desert sled Hepco and Becker bars, and they were like $5 more, but they look identical on that site. So Hepco and Becker seems to say that it's not suited for this bike, it's not gonna fit. Now it looks like it might, so we're gonna try that out. Definitely the upper oil guard one, the oil cooler ones should fit. So we're gonna start with those, and this might be a success, might be a failure on the bottom ones, but let's figure out and see. So these Hepco and Becker bars seem to be a really nice build quality, and the instructions they come with are very thorough and very detailed in terms of giving you torque specs and fastener locations and such. So for the instructions for this one, it's real simple. I'm just gonna be undoing these two shroud upper and lower bolts here. So these are a 4mm. And then the instructions say that we're not going to use these at all anymore, so we can put these in the old spares bin.
In the bin!
Or as Speed Academy would call it, the stash. There we go. So that'll be kind of held in place up on the top as well, so you don't have to necessarily worry about this falling or moving around while you're working on it. So you have 4 bolts for this project on the top. So 2 are going to be 50mm, and then 1 is 45, and then the other is 55. So just make sure you're using the right bolts per the instructions. So the top here, it's going to be one of your 50s. Let's just line that up. We'll loosely put this in place here. Said one of those was a 45. It should be a 40mm, and that's what's going to go on the bottom here on the left side for this engine cover, or for these oil cooler covers. So that's going to be your shortest bolt in the hardware kit. We'll come back later and torque these down. That looks pretty good already. All right, with this side done, let's go ahead and hop over to the right side of the bike. Okay, so now this is basically the same thing over here. We're gonna take these two mounting bolts off. Now this side is slightly different in the fact that you've got the 50 and then the 55 mil left in terms of your bolts. So the longer one's actually going to go on the bottom this time instead of the top. So let's get that guy started. And then we'll just snug these down until we get the torque wrench out. There we go. Okay, as we can see, the Hepco and Becker engine crash bars are a two-piece design for the lower engine guard. There's a left side and a right side, and they join up there in the center like this. So we have those two pieces, and then we have our hardware kit containing the containing the bolts and the spacers and the frame plugs there for the end to keep water out. And then we also have our long bolt that is going to go from one side of the engine through the other. And then some nice detailed instructions as well. So let's go ahead and jump into this lower engine guard install. Okay, for our first step here, we're going to be working on the right side of the bike. So what we need to do first is actually, we're going to pull off this brake lever to make the operation of getting behind here a little bit easier for us. We're going to have to remove the brake light switch on this model. Now, it's really important to note that when Hepco and Becker designed this, as far as I can tell, it's only designed for about the 2017 to the 2019, I think. And after that year, they actually changed up the design of the brake switch to a different design with a little bracket and a square switch that sits on top of that above the brake lever. Now, I don't think they ever designed a piece to work with this, but I still really want to run this design, so I'm probably going to have to figure out some type of new bracket solution for that rear brake switch. But for the moment, we're going to take that off. So this first part's going to be a little bit different than it probably would be on those other bikes. So for like a 2017 to a 2019, you'll probably just want to go ahead and follow the regular instructions that Hepco and Becker gives you. Okay. So now that is off. I'm going to set this out of the way. And there's also a important washer that goes back here. It always gets stuck to the engine because it has grease on it. So make sure and keep that with your brake lever. Just slide it back onto the nut there, or onto the bolt. And this is the brake switch that I was talking about. You'll see that this is a different design than probably the 2017 to 2019s are, or 2016, I can't remember the first year. So what you'll do is take that and just kind of move that out of the way up here for the second. And now back here, there is a 8 millimeter nut that holds on the brake switch bracket. So we're gonna go ahead and take that off now. Now that is one of the worst placements for a bolt because you really can't get anything in there. You can't get a wrench or a ratchet really. And once you do sit it on there, this exhaust is in the way and the bracket's in the way, preventing you from turning it. So what I'm gonna do here is actually pull off the foot peg. So again, using a 6 millimeter Allen key, we're gonna undo this exposed Allen bolt here, out of the way. And now to get to this second bolt, it's a little bit more tricky because you can't just put the Allen key in there. Right, for the second bolt here, it's actually a little bit more tricky to get to because of the design that it's angled in there. So what we're gonna do is actually pull off this whole foot peg assembly. On the bottom side of the foot peg here, there is a C-clip. Okay, make sure not to lose that C-clip. Screwdriver or something, and push that through. Now careful, because this is spring loaded too. And then that spring falls out there. So make sure you've got all those components together I'm actually going to put the pin through with the spring there itself and the C-clip just to make sure that none of that gets lost. Okay, with that removed now, we can go ahead and access our 6mm bolt here in the foot peg area and pull this out. And it actually just takes care of the entire bolt situation there, so we don't have to worry about that anymore because it comes out as part of that. Okay, now with that assembly out of the way, we're going to go ahead and undo this lower engine mounting bolt. Now before we do that though, what we want to do is put a jack under the engine so that it doesn't droop any lower and that we don't have to worry about this thing falling or drooping below where the mounting points are at, so it's not hard to get bolts back through there. This being an 8mm, and then what we're going to do is use the old wrench trick on it. So just get it in there and leverage it correctly and use it to draw that bolt out. Okay, there we go. Now we have the lower engine bolt there. All right, now that that's done, we need to take out this upper engine bolt here. Now, in order to do that, what we need to do is actually get this heat shield out of the way. Now it's just slightly in the way, but it still is in the way. So we'll want to go ahead and take that off. There are 2 Allen keys up here on the top of the heat shield. These are both a 4mm. So now that those bolts are out, you'll find that this is actually a plastic cover with some heat reflective tape. Keep both of your bolts with this until you reinstall. And then there are 2 more Allen keys below that, also 4mm. Go ahead and take these out. All right, for this upper engine bolt here, this is actually going to be a 15mm. So grab a 15mm and an extension. And then go ahead and pull out the 15mm nut that's in here. Save that. All right, so we're at the point where the engine is, where it's critical to have the engine supported by a jack or a jack stand. Probably a jack makes more sense, because what we're going to do at this point is push the bolt through the other side. At that point, the engine block is going to want to drop down a little bit. So we just want to make sure that this thing is supported and it doesn't fall right out of the bottom of your bike, or just, catch on any cables or hoses and rip those. So what I'm going to do is probably take a little, it's like a blunt center punch, and I'm not going to use it to actually punch, the end of the bolt like I'm drilling it, but just to push it through the other side, kind of to tap it through. So I'm going to take the end of this punch here, on and up at the end of the bolt, tap that bolt through. Okay, now that that bolt has dropped through on the other side, I'm gonna go grab it. Now this is a pretty sizable bolt, but the one that replaces it is gonna be even longer. So you're not gonna need this anymore. So hang on to it, like as some kind of dagger. Oh, am I such a nerd? Okay, and then taking our right side engine cover, that's the left side, I'm pretty smart. Don't at me. What we're gonna do is line this spacer up. Line up this engine guard here. And then we will take our newly provided long boy bolt. All right, so before we put this engine guard on, what we need to do is take one of these spacers here, and it's gonna actually sit inside the frame there. So you have 2 that are the same size as the larger ones. Neither one of these fits in there, so we can rule both of those out. And the smaller one does fit inside there, so that's what we're going to be using here. All right, so what we'll do is then you put the large bolt through the engine frame here, good old long boy. Slide your smaller aluminum spacer onto the end of that bolt, and line this up to go through. Okay, I stand corrected on this lower bolt. So that's the larger aluminum spacer here. And then this steel washer is gonna go behind that. Now it also looks like in this diagram here that the steel spacer is actually supposed to go inside of the lower engine bolt hole, but it looks significantly larger in the picture. And I don't think that's gonna fit in here. Okay, let's see how this looks with just the aluminum washer here. Okay, so that fits up well with that larger spacer there. So with that, we are actually complete on this side. So it is time to jump over to the other side and start that install. All right, so I'm gonna get a little bit out of the outside of what the steps are and skip a little bit forward. I'm test fitting up this left side piece to make sure that it works with the right side and everything meets up. You know, just with the discrepancies we've seen so far. So it does look like it's gonna be pretty much a perfect fit. So with that, I'm gonna jump back here and get into the steps here. So then what we are gonna do is take off this lower engine mounting bolt. This is the one behind the shift linkage here. It's the furthest back one, closest to the back wheel, and it is directly beneath this little like hind jointed area that connects the actual gearbox to the shift lever. Try and sneak a 6mm Allen key back here. Actually, it looks like if we upshift the lever here, then it moves it out of the way enough for us to slide the Allen key back there. So let's see if that works for us. No, we just don't want to put all that strain onto the shift lever either. Oh wow, that is tight in there. Now this bolt is so long that it doesn't look like we're going to be able to keep this shift lever in place no matter how we finagle it, so looks like this guy is coming out. Okay, and there's a 10mm nut on the back side of this that we'll need to hold on to. Okay, there we go. Make sure and keep those two things together. Slide this up out of the way here and slide that out of your way. Okay, and then we'll take that newly provided hex headed bolt that they have, as we're not reusing that original. Go ahead and thread that through and into the old location. And then this is going to go up here, of course, to meet up with the upper engine mounting bolt. Okay, I managed to get that bottom bolt there threaded into the engine. It was a bit of a pain. I just had to play with the angle a bit and shift some things around. So before I go any further, what I'm going to do actually is take the aluminum spacer, the smaller one, and it's going to go over these threads here and into the frame. And then there is a little plastic connector here. It's the same on both ends, and that connects the tubes down here. So with that in place, I'm going to go ahead and put this into place up top. And I'm going to begin tightening this bolt down some more. Before I snug everything down to its permanent home, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that everything is okay to start lining up from the other side to here. So I'm actually going to go to the other side and start threading that long bolt through this section here, and then make sure that these are lined up to connect down here. Okay, now that that's snug in its home, I'm going to go to the other side and continue tightening down this bolt. It's just kind of a balancing act between tightening these bolts and making sure everything is lined up and will, you know, be cohesive before you really cinch everything down. So as we can see here, there's a little plastic connector where those two bottom bars meet up there. Now, I am probably going to try and press those into place here because they're not exactly cinched together. So I'm just going to try and squeeze those two bars together to meet up there. Yeah, so just go and try ahead and thread that little plastic bolt in there because hammering it in wasn't exactly the best idea, if I'm honest. So with that, we're just going to go through and make sure that our shifter assemblies and brake assembly are all rebolted. You know, those are just the reverse of removal. So just going to go through that and then tighten down everything to the torque specs. They nicely provide the torque specs here in the yellow yellow printout here. So we'll go through and tighten down each bolt, and then after that, we are done with this project. I also decided to purchase some of these Evotech sliders for the front and rear, so you're going to see me install these here. We're going to start with these front sliders here. These are incredibly easy to put on. Just make sure that your washers are in the correct places here, and then take the nut off one end here. And keeping the assembly together on the end, assuming you haven't taken it apart. You will just slide this through the front axle. Take that little puck assembly here and make sure that the aluminum spacer in there is sitting correctly, and then drop your washer inside of there. And then take your nut and thread it in place there. Okay, and these use a 13 mil on each side, so you just want to tighten up one side and hold the other. And make sure that those are in place on each end. And there we have it. It's easy as that. Now the rear is different in the fact that these ones are actually called bobbins back here. And you can see they have a little groove, a little channel here. And what that is for a motorcycle stand that comes up underneath those little channels and swings up and picks up the motorcycle by these little bobbins here. Now you can get them without this design. You can get them, you know, the same as the front, but I hope to actually get a motorcycle stand that swings up and picks the rear up with these. So I decided to opt for these. They were like $5 more, so worth it in my opinion. But it looks like these both use a 10 millimeter on each end. So we're just gonna take off the nut here on the end and approach it the same as we did the front.